Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be going over a email assistant that I've created in Init. I'm going to start out by just giving a really high level overview of what's happening here and the different stages and selections or routes this workflow can take. Then we'll go through two examples of the workflow running, one going through the customer support branch and the other going through the sales branch. And after we complete the first example, I will go through the details of how it's actually working. Then we'll do the second example in the active mode, so we can see in more of a live situation how it would work. But without any further ado, let's just jump right into it. So this document loader section, I will come back to later, but for now we're just going to skip because that relates to the sales workflow branch that we'll go into in the live. But for now, I'll just come back to this. The first thing that happens is this workflow is triggered on an email being received. This is currently set up through Gmail, but it could be any email service provider that you use. The next thing is we're actually routing the email between one of these three branches currently, or if it is not meeting the criteria of these three branches, it just goes to a do nothing node, so nothing happens to the email. You could also set up like automatically deleting. You could add like a spam branch or advertisements branch, so automatically delete those type of emails. But currently we just have it to not do anything. It doesn't meet this criteria. So all of these nodes together are just putting it into one of these four buckets: the customer support, sales, internal, or other. And then based on that, we take different steps. So for our customer support, which is the first one we'll look at, we get the key points, send those to the user to determine whether the email is high or low priority. If it's high priority, we'll send an immediate follow-up email with some information based on what was in the original email, as well as asking them to set up a time for a meeting. And if it is a lower priority, we just create a task in our task management system and send a message to the user that, hey, this email came through from the customer. We've created a task, but maybe this is something that doesn't need like an immediate follow-up. Next branch is the sales workflow. It's pretty similar to the customer support, just instead of answering the question, we are letting them know about services we provide, how we might be able to help the specific situation they brought up. So this agent is crafting that email, and then it gets sent through an approval loop for the user to give feedback until we finally get to the send, and it actually sends the reply. And that's the same in step here. We have the same approval loop and the same send out the email. The final one is the internal workflow. This one is really basic. I just created a note interaction for the user to determine how long of a meeting they would potentially want. And then this agent just creates a meeting invite and sends the information out to the user based on their availability. The internal one I didn't develop too much, but again, you could add in more branches, you could add in additional logic. So if you wanted other options other than always scheduling a meeting for the internal, you could have if statements or user feedback that branches off the logic. There's a lot that you could do, but let's just jump into actually running through our first test in the inactive branch. And so pretty quickly, we'll go from our email, and we've now routed. So this is our first point of like contact. This is from a previous test run I had run, but this is the new message we just got that's summarizing us the key points of the email. So this is what the client actually sent to us. And then I also currently have it set up so the AI is recommending kind of the next steps. So it's recommending that we revise they revise the forecast immediately and then continue to monitor month to month for further refinement. So based on this information, it should be giving us what we need to decide whether it's high or low priority. For this example, I'll select high priority. Then we head back here, and just like that, we have our actual email. So here is the draft of the email that is sent to us for approval. And you can see it's doing a pretty good job of addressing the key points that it brought up. And I also have it set up so that it will also always include this Calendly link for scheduling and always sign off as me. Of course, you could give this a different name if you wanted to. There's a lot of flexibility and customization that you have, but this is how I have it set up. And so if we are good with this, we'll just say approved. And now it has actually sent off the email. You can see here, And because this is a test situation, this is actually an email that is going to me. So here is the email details that we just saw in the text message, but I just wanted to show you it does actually send the email in this case. So yeah, that's the example of the customer support branch that we had ready. So I'm just going to go pretty quickly through. I'm not going to get into any of the actual node setup for this build, but just more of a general idea of what each piece of this workflow is doing. And just kind of a general thought when I was building this out, you can do this a lot of different ways. You could use more agents that have tools that are able to send emails and gather information and all of these type of things. When I'm building, I tend to lean more towards a predefined workflow path that gives a lot more guardrails and gives agents very specific and limited jobs. So I have a few agents that are actually like drafting the email, but they don't have the ability to send that email. I have to approve, and then it goes to this actual send email node. I could give them the option to actually send the email, but just for me personally, I like the element of human review in the process. So that's not something that I have chosen to do in this scenario. But going back to the beginning, as we mentioned, it's triggered by an email. Then the first step is we're pulling out key information from that email. For example, the company name, if a company website is given, and then the first and last name of the person. The next step is we're just setting what we pass through this summary as the text of the email. I will show the email node real quick, but you can see there's a bunch of extra information here that is not relevant to the summary. All we really need is this text portion. So this configuration node is just setting that to pass into the summarize, so it doesn't get mixed up with all of the extra email information that's coming from this trigger node. This is just a sheet that we created to store all the emails, mainly so that when I was testing, I can make sure that everything was working properly and review it. But this could be good to have if you're using it live. So you have a quick way to review like all of the email that has gone through, how it classified them. That way you can review the process as it's working and further refine it to make sure that it's working exactly as you expect. The next node is getting our client list. In this example, we're just using a Google Sheet, but this could pull from any PM system that has an API which allows you to do that, which is almost all of them. The next step is this code node, which is just comparing the list of clients that we have in our Google Sheet to the actual client that we got from the email, and determining if they exist in our current client list or if they are not a current client. All of that is passed through this labeling agent, and his job is just to decide which of these 4 branches the email should go to. So in this case, he's decided customer support, and this is just the actual routing. So when we pass the label that we had given it to the switch node, it will continue down that specific path. Next is our key points agent. The summary here is very brief and doesn't necessarily give us everything we need about the email. So you can see this is just a couple of sentences on the email, and here's the actual almost full original email. And it does a decent job of giving the summary. It does more than what it needs to for this labeling agent, but for determining whether this is high or low priority, I thought it would be better to give a key points layout that we saw in the message. So this is just noting, hey, what are the most important things in this email? Are there any questions that we need to address? Are there any specific action items that were brought up? Those things are put into a bullet pointed list that's given to the user to determine whether it's high or low priority. Then if it's high priority, we're going to these customer support email agent that just actually drafts the email. So it's taking the information that it has, creating the draft email that we saw, then sending that to the user for approval. Once it's approved, it actually gets sent as a reply. And then if it's not approved, we have this revision agent that will make changes based on the user feedback. And this is a loop. So you can go around here as many times until you get the email that you want, and then you can send it off. If we were to determine that this was a lower priority task, it would simply add it to our task management system. In this case, we're just using Google Tasks for an example, and then send a message to the user related to this task that they have a new task that's been added to their to-do list. The sales branch is pretty similar to the customer support branch, just we only have one route. There's no logic. So it's just taking the sales email, and this is where our document loader comes in. You can see a couple of tools where our earlier agent only is connected to a chat model. So this is allowing this agent to search the internet for information about the specific client, as well as search the information that we've provided to a database which is just a way for us to give it more permanent memory of things about our company. In this case, we gave it a policy or a services doc that I just had AI generate for an example. Here it is, the actual service doc. But you'll see when we turn this live and run through, it will be actually pulling information off this service document rather than just making up answers to the question, which is what we would prefer it to do. Again, the next step is just this approval loop. So we're sending the message to the user. Here's our current email. Is this good, or do we need to make changes? Again, we can go around that as many times as we need to, and once it's approved, we will actually reply. The other thing I wanted to mention is both of these approval loops have a memory. That way, this agent will remember the last 5 revisions of the email. So if you're working towards an email that you want to be refined, you won't have to keep repeating every single change you wanted to make every time you give it feedback. So for example, if the first change you want is to make it more concise, and then the second change is you want to add in a specific detail, it will remember that you asked for the email to be concise when it's making the change of adding in the second detail. So that's just a way to like help the agent retain information a little bit and be a little bit smarter as it's editing the email. Of course, this is something you can change. So if you wanted to remember more revisions, like I think up to 50 is however high you can go. But in this case, I figured I probably wouldn't really be revising it more than 5 times. And the final branch is really brief. This is our actual agent we've created with tools. So this guy, the first step, if it's internal, is we get the meeting time from the user. So the user just picks however long of a meeting that we want to have to address the issue that was brought up from our team. Then our agent will use its tools of getting the events on our calendar and then create a meeting with whoever it is who sent us this email. And then the final step is sending a message of those meeting details. This step is probably not necessary because when you create a new meeting, you should get a confirmation if you're using Google. But just in case you maybe didn't get that or you wanted it in a different format than email, I included this to give the meeting details. So that's a really high level of what the workflow is actually doing. And the final step, or the final piece that I wanted to show, is send off this email. The first thing is we've got our message. So this has actually already passed through into the sales and crafted our sales email and now sent it to us for approval. Looks like I accidentally sent the email twice. But you can see it's including this information about our services. So we have core accounting and close, intelligent automation and integration, and then financial strategy and advisory. And if we go into our document, these are specifically pulled from what we've listed in this fake document, right? So this is just a nice way to get your emails, your responses to be a lot more specific to your actual company and situation. And this one is giving like way more information. But here I wanted to also show the revision. So for example, this one is a pretty long email and I want it to be shorter. Please make this email shorter and more conversational in tone. So I've given it that feedback. And almost immediately, I now have a new email here. So now we've gone from this original email to this new email, starting out with hi there instead of hello, which is a little bit more conversational. And then we're using some not as professional language. We've shortened it a lot. And we have our sign off that we have set to always sign off like this. And we also mentioned, hey, we always want to give them the option to call in our sales flow. So that's showing like the actual revision loop. Just for brevity, I will go ahead and approve this, but you could continue to make changes. As we saw, it does actually take into account your notes when it is in this active form. And you'll see, since I've approved it again, I sent this from my email. So here is the email response that I sent, which is exactly what we approved. Hopefully this was helpful, interesting information of an idea of how you can use AI and automations, specifically in 8N, to help save you a lot of time in managing your emails and working through your inbox. If you enjoyed this, please definitely leave a like on the video, comment with any questions you have, and subscribe if you want to see more of this type of content. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you made it to the end, you are a legend, and I look forward to seeing you again in my next video. Thanks.